The following program is a Town of Colonie television production of the William K. Sanford Town Library.
Welcome to Albany County News. I'm Mary Rozak, the Director of Communications for Albany County. And we are going to be talking about, again, the women of Albany County. For Women's History Month in March, we wanted to highlight the women who are in leadership roles, commissioners leading many of Albany County's departments. And today, joining me, we have Karen Ziegler, the Director of the Crime Victim and Sexual Violence Center. Welcome, Karen.
Yeah.
Karen, you've been here many times.
Yes, happy to be.
And someone who has not been here at all, this is her debut. This is your premiere. Jen Clement, Jennifer, who is the Commissioner of the Albany County Department of Human Resources. Welcome.
Thank you.
Jen, I'm going to start with you because this is the first time you've been here, and I know that it can be a little nerve-wracking. And one of the things that I think, one of the reasons you haven't been here is when Human Resources, when we think about that, you really do the work for the behind-the-scenes folks, the 2,500 people in the Albany County workforce. Just tell me a little bit about what Human Resources does. We'll just start out that way before we actually start our real meat of our discussion today.
Human Resources does everything from payroll all the way up to workers' compensation claims, and then hiring and separations from service.
Mm-hmm. So you really are interacting with a lot of people. Mm-hmm. Probably, do many people just call on the phone and say, hey, does Albany County have any open jobs, or do they stop by, or do you get that?
We don't get a lot of calls on the phone. We usually get mail or walk-ins, people looking to sit for civil service exams, also just looking for open vacancies for labor class positions. We get a lot of walk-ins.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a little bit different. If you're in a private company, it's very difficult for someone to just kind of walk in and start asking about job openings. How did you get into Human Resources? Is that something that when you were a little girl, you said, I want to be the HR commissioner?
I don't think as a little girl I said I want to be in HR, but I started with Albany County as a policy analyst, and then I sat for a civil service exam for Director of Personnel, and I became the Director of Personnel, and then I was promoted to Deputy Commissioner and then Commissioner. So I kind of moved into it gradually over time with Albany County.
Wow. Well, wonderful. So you've been with Albany County for 20
years.
20 years. Congratulations.
Nice.
It's wonderful. Well, and you are very tall.
I am very tall.
And that is not necessarily with heels on all the time. When you were growing up, did you have a hard time because you were taller?
I think I had a hard time because I was tall very early on. So in like 6th grade, I was 5'9". So that was really hard because boys tend to be not 5'9". Did I say 6'9"? 5'9". And so it was awkward just being tall. But then I think as you progressed into the upper grades, it wasn't so bad to be tall because you stand out, and it hasn't turned out to be a bad thing.
I wish I were taller. I'm 5'6", and that's in 5'6", and I've got the average height for a woman, not the average weight. We're not going to go into that. The average shoe size, the average other stuff. But I have two tall sisters, and I often wonder how my life would have been different. I bring that up because as I then we'll talk to Karen. The national theme for Women's History Month has to do with it's nevertheless she persisted, and it's women who have fought against discrimination against women. And how we look, how tall we are, that can impact, we all know that, and probably through many of the HR probably continuing ed courses and things that you've had, it talks about people making more money if they're taller, if they're thinner, if they're all different kind of variables.
Privileges.
So it's kind of interesting. That's one of the things that I wanted to ask is if you ever felt discriminated against because you were a tall woman. Even growing up, I think
Yeah, I don't know if discriminated against, but you definitely, people are intimidated by someone who is taller. There's perceptions there. And so I'm probably more cautious in my approach. If I really tower over another individual, you don't want to seem as though you are, somehow being more aggressive. So I think I'm cognizant of my height.
Sure.
Since with heels on, I'm like 6'2", and so I definitely am aware of it. I don't think I've been discriminated against. I definitely think people respond differently towards people who are taller, or they may have preconceived notions of my personality based on the fact that I'm taller than the average person.
Sure. And when I use the word discriminated, just for our purposes, I guess treated differently in our, as you mentioned, in our conversation. So Karen, this is a good segue too, because when we talk about discrimination and we talk about the whole Me Too movement and everything that you deal with every day, talk to me about what that's like for you, being a woman, leading the department, leading the center that you do, and having all of this get national attention now.
It's been exciting and a little alarming. It's exciting to be doing the work we do at this moment in time when people are willing to come forward and willing to speak, and other people are willing to listen, sometimes for the first time ever, and that's been amazing. I'm cautious, though. I'm a little worried about backlash. I'm worried about people getting tired of hearing this. I think that there is so much sexual abuse, child abuse, domestic violence, that at some level people reject it. They'll start to say, oh, that can't be true. And I'm just a little concerned that there is this much sexual abuse, there is this much child abuse and domestic violence, that when people do come forward, and I think the numbers are overwhelming, that other people are going to reject that and reject the whole message, and I don't want us to take a step back.
Do you, and I will use in this instance, say the word discriminated. Do you feel discriminated against or treated differently because you lead this center and now there may be some backlash? When you go into a situation, are there times when you feel you're treated differently or maybe aggressively by those who don't necessarily think this Me Too movement, it's just, I use the quotes.
Sure, absolutely. I think there are a lot of people who don't, privilege was a word when we treat specially because of certain characteristics, so we'd call that privilege. So I think when people who have privilege, who have never been harmed and haven't been the victims of crime, and due to their own privilege, don't want to hear about other people's vulnerabilities. I think that people defend themselves by victim blaming. And because it is too scary to think of that any one of us could be the victim of a crime, that therefore we want to blame the victim. It was something that she wore, she did, she said, or she consumed. So if they can blame her and find a reason why that happened to her, and I avoid that behavior, I'm safe. When we look at violence against women in whatever form it takes, we're all vulnerable because we're women. And whether it's misogyny, whether it's a power and control issue, whether it's any number of things, I think that's very alarming for women to think about.
How did you get to be the director of this center? Is that something that, as I asked Jen, what did you want to be when you grew up? Is that something that you had always wanted to do, to work with men and women in this instance, or what had you intended to do?
Actually, I had gone to school to be a social worker, and I was at the Albany County Outpatient Mental Health Clinic. I started as a staff social worker, and then I was promoted to a supervising social worker, and then the clinical director. But as a staff social worker, I saw a lot of people I was working with, men as well as women, but primarily women, had trauma in their histories. So they might have substance abuse and mental health issues and trauma in their histories. And I became very interested in that, and I went to educational events and did reading, and I became more and more immersed in working with people who had trauma in their backgrounds. A lot of people who have mental health histories and substance abuse have trauma in their backgrounds. And when the position of department head became open, I was very honored to be able to apply for that position, because it really dovetailed into my experience with substance abuse and mental health, and a real focus on trauma survivors.
You both are mothers. You both have sons. How do you, in this day and age, raise sons knowing that here we thought the world was, for many, in many instances, was going to be a better place. And over the last 6 months, 7 months, we have heard from so many women that it really has not evolved as much as we had thought. And they're very brave, and they have started something that will change, that is changing the world. But as you raise sons, is there anything you tell them? Is there anything that we should be telling? Maybe not just sons, but our sons and daughters. Jen?
For me, I think that it's important that my sons see that I'm working and that's okay, and then that's the norm, and that I'm in the workplace, and that there should be fair and equal treatment. And I think that by example, by being in the workplace, and that they know that that's where I am, and there is this very clear expectation of what goes on and what's okay and what's acceptable, that I think it's by example, and that what they see every day, what things are not okay and what things I get upset about, they know. And so I think for me, it just that example and them knowing very clearly what my expectations are for treatment towards women.
Karen, I know we've talked a little bit about this on a previous show, but I know not everyone saw, so share again.
I think one of the things I definitely would want to agree with what Jen said, just by example. But my son and I would have conversations. We would spend time together, and we would be watching television or listening to a song or watching a movie, and I would challenge what he saw and what was the message behind that, and even to say, is this a demographic that you can relate to? Why is everyone in this grouping white? Why is everyone in this grouping male? We would talk about humor. If somebody made a racist joke on television or a sexist joke on television, we would talk about that, about why people thought that was funny, why people thought that was okay to be included in some of this entertainment. So I think it was just spending time together and experiencing different forms of media. And just asking the questions about what did you think about that, and why do you think that was okay, and why don't you think that's okay? And I think that ability to question, I think, really lends itself to his exploring what he thought was okay and not okay in the world.
I'm going to ask you both the question. First, it's going to go to Karen, so you got a minute to think about it, Jen. You're both leaders. And yet I know that women don't often think of themselves as leaders, or when they hear the word leader, as I say it now. I want you to tell me what you think of and how you see yourself in that role. Karen?
That's a tough one. Sometimes I definitely think of myself as a leader among other leaders. So I don't necessarily think of myself as out front, but the staff of Crime Victim and Sexual Violence Center is amazing. And I think the work we do and that we're empowered to do is amazing work. And I think I learn as much from my staff and our volunteers and the people that we work with and serve as much as I hope they learn from me. So I think we try to have a very non-hierarchical structure in Crime Victims where everyone is empowered to give feedback and to give ideas. And I love being challenged, and I love it when my staff present new opportunities. That's exciting.
You're going to get the last word, Jen.
That is a tough question. I think that I agree with Karen that it is being a leader among leaders, though, where I rely on my colleagues, other commissioners who are leaders, and we don't tend to call ourselves leaders, to assist and help. And you don't think of a leader as being asking for help and asking for assistance, but it's exactly what it is. As we're kind of navigating our way through tough issues, we're relying on each other and our coworkers to kind of help us through that. And that's, I think, part of being a leader. And in my home, I think my kids would say I'm the leader in the home. So I've clearly retained that title in my house, which is tough too, to always be knowing and having those hard conversations and being the leader in tough times.
Well, thank you both for being strong leaders in Albany County. We're lucky to have you, Karen Ziegler, Director of the Crime Victim and Sexual Violence Center in Albany County, and Jen Clement, the Albany County Commissioner for the Department of Human Resources. We're going to switch chairs and be back in just a second.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Change seats, and joining me now is Michelle McClave, the Commissioner of the Albany County Department of Social Services. Welcome. You've been here before. We've talked about what you do before. But for Women's History Month, we're turning the tables a little bit, talking a little bit personally how things interact with our jobs. And you work with a department where a lot of the folks that you actually see coming in, you probably see people that have faced discrimination of some sort or another. Can you talk a little bit about how you and the folks that work with you on your teams, how you deal with that, how you turn things around for them?
Yeah, and a lot of the clients that we see at DSS happen to be women. The families that come in often are led by single women. The people in need, in poverty, often a large percentage are women and their children. So our frontline facing, our client-facing staff have to deal with that every day, seeing families in crisis and families in need. So I think that they work on just doing their job, getting the benefits out to people in as quick as possible so that people have a place to live, they have food on their table, that they have heat, so they feel good that they're really helping, serving as a safety net and helping people get to the next phase in their life and preventing a real crisis from happening. So I think that based on what we do for people, they can feel good that they're having an impact. I know it does take a toll on some when we see adult protective clients coming in and families, as I said, in crisis, and the staff support each other. And I see my job as setting the systems up so that our staff are supported in whatever they need in order to do their jobs in the best way possible.
Now, there have been men and women in the commissioner role over the years, and right now we are it's a lot of estrogen at the top. Very strong women. You have some very strong deputies. What do you think a woman may bring differently to a leadership position than, let's say, a man in the same position?
Well, I always find, and I come from the nonprofit world as well, where there were a lot of women leaders, that women are more maybe democratic and inclusive, and they look for other opinions to inform their decisions. So in decision making, we often ask for feedback and ask what other people think before making a decision. I tend to find that women are more process oriented sometimes, and also maybe we go with our feelings sometimes a little bit more, and in some ways that can be good and supportive in the workplace. Sometimes you can get yourself in trouble with that.
It's interesting because at least two of the other women had similar responses in saying that, the processing, bringing other people in, a little bit of the emotion, actually helping. Have you ever, and coming from the nonprofit world, have you ever felt that you've been treated differently in professionally as you changed jobs, looked for promotions, whatever, because you're a woman?
Yeah, I mean, in the nonprofit world, there's a lot of women. We're caretakers, I guess, in general, and we're drawn to those roles. So there were a lot of women in the nonprofit, as there are at DSS. Although I found in working with colleagues in other nonprofits that there was kind of a little bit of the jobs that men had were in the larger nonprofits, the more business-like nonprofits, and that the women tended to be in the smaller, less compensated nonprofits and that kind of thing. So I never felt necessarily discriminated against, though, because I kind of got almost any position that I went for.
Sure.
Although I did take over in one of my positions. I took over as executive director from a former executive director who happened to be a man. And I did find that there were a lot of people who thought I couldn't do the job.
Because?
And I have to say that I believe some of it was that I wasn't a male leader. And I think I had to prove myself twice as much as he had to when he took over the job before me. So it took me a lot longer, I think, to get to that place of respect, maybe, and people believing that I could do the job, and I did do the job well. Whereas it didn't take him very long at all when he came onto the job. And I think that we had the same competencies.
What do you think if someone were to describe you, an adjective or two, for your leadership? I'm going to get very definitively, specifically into something, but for your leadership skills, if they were going to describe you, would they describe what might they say?
What I want people to say, or what they might say?
Well, you know what? Wherever it takes you, Michelle.
Well, as I said, I do think that I look for other input and opinions in making decisions, and ask what other people think. And I have to admit that, I don't know everything, and I can't possibly know it all. And also my philosophy is letting decisions be made kind of at the lowest possible level that they can be made. And yet, when the hard decisions need to be made, I know that I need to make them. So I'm not afraid to take on those hard decisions, and yet let people grow and make their own mistakes and be creative.
Sometimes when we think of adjectives, when we hear
I'll give you an adjective.
then that's fine. That's fine. When we think of adjectives, sometimes there's a very male, female. There are two different ways to describe. If I say the word aggressive, what does that make you think of?
A lawyer, some kinds of positions.
Or if I say the word assertive.
Well, those are traditional ones. Describes a woman who's being assertive, and one may describe a man who's,
because it's not uncommon. We've heard those before. Tenacious versus stubborn. Why do you think tenacious usually that we've heard described in a male environment, stubborn is sometimes described for a female leader. Why do you think we still have those two different things? Any idea why in 2018? Why we're still talking about a strong woman is not necessarily, strong sometimes is not seen as a good thing.
It's not seen as a good thing, yeah, exactly. Well, I think that we don't have enough women in leadership positions in general throughout society. And I think, and look at the Congress, look at who's representing us. The more we have women's voices and women in these positions, I think that image will shift. I'm hopeful that image will shift. And also, in the Fortune 500 companies, there aren't that many women. There just aren't that many women that we see in these really top leadership positions, or in general in leadership positions.
Did you have someone that you looked to as you were as a mentor, or someone as you were growing up and professionally that was a woman, or even a man who may have instilled that in you?
I only did it with peers, I think. I didn't, because there weren't a lot of women in leadership or directorship roles when I was coming up, but yet there were other women who were trying to do the same thing. So it was really a support to each other and learning from each other. There were groups of nonprofit women that we met on a regular basis and shared insights and support. And I mentored with many different people, so I really learned I observed maybe someone who did something that I thought really worked or was really good. And also from my own mistakes. I think that's where I learned the most, is by making my own mistakes and what not to do again.
You have a teenage daughter. With everything that's going on a national level, with everything that we've seen, with real questions about how women have been treated, with harassment, sexual harassment, we know that there's still a wage gap. I haven't talked about this, but women make 80% of what men make on average in the same job. How do you raise a daughter in this day and age now with all of that still swirling around? And what do you tell her? How do you support her?
Well, it's so funny because she loves that I'm the boss. You know, I'm not the ultimate boss, but I'm the boss of 300 people, and she's just she loves that. So I'm hoping that inspires her to become a leader also, and to go for a top level position if she would like that, and that. You know, my husband, her father, is an art teacher, so we both work in kind of fields that are not necessarily the top-paying fields in our society. I am a little concerned that maybe she sees us working in these fields, that's where she thinks her limitations are. Whereas,
Has she said anything? I know she's still early teens, so has she said?
Well, she's interested in science, so I'm very much encouraging her, because that is kind of a male-dominated field. And I'm saying, yep, absolutely, you could do that. You're good at it. So, she wants to look at schools that offer science STEM, and I'm not discouraging her. So I'm hoping that comes through, that she can do anything she wants. And I feel like she does feel that way. And some of it is the times we're in. It's easier. Girls do feel a little bit more, I think, that they can do more things than maybe when I was growing up.
When you were growing up, very, very quickly, we have limited time, but did you think you would be where you are today?
No, I don't think so. I think I knew I wanted to work in a field that was in the helping field, and yet I didn't ever think that I would kind of be in a leadership role. I really thought I would, be a social worker, counselor, that kind of a thing. But I found that I really love the management aspect of the business, and working with people and managing people who are the ones delivering the services to the clients. So,
well, thank you for all you do. We appreciate that, and I know that County Executive McCoy appreciates what all the commissioners, the entire county workforce does, but particularly for this month wanted to highlight women and asked, and I thought it was a great idea to do this. So thank you. Michelle McClave, Commissioner of the Albany County Department of Social Services. I hope that you will have enjoyed this two-part series with some of the women, the leadership in Albany County. Women's History Month in March, very important thing. Women, you can do anything you put your mind to. You just have to set that goal. I'm Mary Rozak. Thanks for joining us for Albany County News. I'll see you again soon.